Hello, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer 1745 here with another episode of Hearts of Iron 3 with Black Ice 9.11. I had to pause there to remember whether it was 3 or 4, and of course I'm looking at it and I know it, but I had so used to saying these things. Okay, first up I want to say thank you. Likes are up like 6 times than what they were before, since I've sort of been asking you at the front of these videos to like the videos, up like about 6 times or more. And comments are no, that's wrong. I think likes are up like 4 times as much, and comments are like about 6 times or more up as normal in the just couple of days. Just spiked up big time, and overall viewership is up by about 30%. And of course, all of you guys, most of you are routine viewers, so you've just hit that like button, and so you're just as here normal. That's got to be, I can't imagine that big of a sort of spike, because I can look along at, other than adding in Panzer Corps during part of that time, but not the first day that it spiked up. And that's a good viewing numbers, but not that big of stuff. It's got to have helped with the YouTube algorithm. The more likes, the more they show it to other people that watch similar content but don't watch me or this channel, or however you want to say it, or this particular series. It's showing it off more, which is then bringing in more viewers. So I want to thank you very much and ask you if you would continue to just hit that like button, and if you will, just go down and hit, make a comment, hi, and I'll say hi back to you. And that's all it needs to be. Don't need to go beyond that. Now, of course, again, if you want to say something more substantial, love to hear it, but just wanted to say thank you about that. And from a comment from Nagaro, I hope I'm saying his name right, sort of about border gore here, and I know obviously this is ridiculous. Trust me, I get that. I'm not that, but I'm a little surprised at how many people it means as much as it does to them. Now, there should be some sort of event, he said, to sort of swap it out. There is. The sort of end of the Bitter Peace event, it does establish a rather reasonable border with the Soviet Union, and I think it's sort of along the Ural Mountains and the Ural River here. The only reason I know this is the Ural River is because it says it right there. Thanks, Alexi, who made the River Names mod. It's now integrated into Black Ice. Again, if you want it, you go to show/hide battle plans, and but you also have to choose battle plans. B-Ice Geo is what it's called there, to get your river names and other oceans, Caspian Sea, Black Sea. He's added those, and it was even clever enough that I think some of them are on, well, of course the river names are in different angles, but Arabian Sea, Indian Ocean, lots of cool stuff that he did there. Just giving him the props for it. There is sort of the Bitter Peace surrender that does it. Now, I went well beyond the border for one primary reason and 2 secondary reasons. The primary reason, of course, is the super ridiculous forts around Moscow and Leningrad. We know, of course, the historical siege, and that's sort of what they're trying to showcase up here. But the historical siege doesn't take into account of, pushing well past Leningrad, because they were sort of barely keeping this blocked up here. And definitely during the winter they were using, ice road truckers. I haven't really watched any of those episodes, but I've seen it advertised on A&E television. Ice road trucking across Lake Ladoga in the winter, and boats, ships, maybe not big ocean going ships, but fairly biggish ships. And those are, of course, the bigger the target, but still they were able to move at night and whatnot to keep supplies flowing, and still even maintain though it was more the Finnish stopped advancing forward, but keep the Finnish border sort of manned as well too. So that's, of course, there was massive starvation and whatnot going on in the city at the time. But that's what sort of kept that going and never allowed Germany to just starve, literally, whether food or starve it of ammunition and resupply of men and whatnot, which, had they been able to cut it off, one or the other, ammunition, food, or something would have ended it, and then freed up a lot of units, or at least units to then face outward instead of facing there. So it doesn't take into account that. And yes, there is the Kremlin. Yes, I know they did make somewhere along here, which, yeah, some of these forts are very realistic in the sense that they made some very big, it's been years since I've specifically seen it, but footage of big massive tank ditches that were just look miles and miles long. They were, huge things that, yeah, engineers can easily get in and, because they're earthen, easily get in there and pull it down and whatever else. But to do it under fire, if you had enough troops and equipment and ammunition to sort of cover these big tank ditches and whatnot, would have definitely significantly slowed up the German advance. So they were doing that, and then, like I say, the Kremlin and other things. This would have been a really sort of, if the Soviets decided to, I'll move them to Berlin, because I don't know where I want to use them, if at all, again. But probably we don't need to use them in Moscow ever again. So we'll send them slowly, miles per 0. 100%, currently 100% default. No. That's sort of why I don't. I like to keep these things sitting in this queue, and then once you get there, drop them in. Sort of representing the railway movement. So yeah, is because but the ridiculous levels that this went to. Since I couldn't take the cities, well, maybe I could have, but it could have taken them a little sooner, I'm sure. I'm sure that I could have, even with more or less what I was doing. But just sort of waiting and hopefully to starve them out a bit. Some of that delay is my fault, but still it's overly ridiculously strong. With that happening, then there was two reasons I kept pushing. Because if those had fallen much earlier, the whole idea is, and it was originally designed before they went so extreme on those things, the whole idea is once you take those in Stalingrad, and especially if you take Murmansk and Archangel, normally by that time with the other sort of normal victory points you get, you normally got a Soviet surrender when you're well back in here, maybe not even to Astrakhan or something, but that then will give you much greater amount of territory that you would get to have. That was the idea and how it worked. But because that wasn't happening, I pushed on, partially to get some of these things. Let's see, we didn't get that one, but we did get like this one. And some of these guys up here you can see, and I'm building now a few here, 25 rares, which is almost 9, 42 rares. Again, I'm 25 rares, I'm increasing our rare. So wanted to grab some of these, and some of these might have been inside of my territory, and some of them wouldn't. These I know down here wouldn't have been, or at least a couple of these down here wouldn't have been, I remember trying to capture them in like the last playthrough that we did or something, in time before the fall and of Moscow. But this time did capture them, which of course gives me another strategic resource, which helps. IC efficiency up 2.5%, which is good, of course. That reason, plus, as we saw fighting down in here and other things, so long as I kept moving forward, I mean, if I stalled, you could see the Soviets counterattacking effectively, but so long as I kept moving forward, I was capturing supplies, so it kept my units in supply, didn't have to send supplies out from Berlin, and it kept the enemy off balance and unable to muster forces to come back for a counterattack. So there was also a sort of tactical military reason other than trying to get resources. But beyond the resources and you know, there's no real great reason to try to get this territory out here. And I don't know whether the Soviets will ever build up a big enough army that this will be launching point to cut deep into my territory, or whether this is more of just a soon-to-be pocket if we go back to war versus not. So yeah, okay. So we've got here. We're going to come to here. We're going to come to here. Those guys can come to there. If we start to run low on supplies and to sort of anticipate some of that. Okay, guys, you fly down to here so that we can fly in supplies. So we're not going to, at least I don't think, run out of supplies. I don't really want to attack across whatever. This is the Indus, I believe. I actually got most of the major battlefields, and I did poke them to do a few others, or rivers, the major battlefield zones, but I think that's the Indus there. I don't know what that thing is. But get across the river, so I'm attacking. Now they're attacking the Lucknow district. And we've won. For the same reason that I might have been able to, Dar es Salaam, East Africa garrison shattered. Okay. That's what's supposed to happen, of course, meaning stop effing attacking once you... Okay, you go somewhere else to get healed up. Want longish range stuff. Not tactical bombers. These guys will be fine. Because these big zones out here. Make sure they can get to where they need to be. And we've won again. But okay, use support again. So that's what sort of happens, is that we are still moving in. No, just support. We're still, you know, whatever's moving forward, but then something else comes in to occupy the province. Yeah, these guys are just out of organization. René à toi. Still commanding these former French units down here. Or free French. Uh-oh. Okay, well, if they go in, they're going up there like they should. What about these guys rejoining the attack? Ah, fighting Monty, eh? Adds Hind Division, high adds. I am building a couple of sort of super, no, you can't quite see. If I move, well, we can temporarily move to the top so you can see what I'm building. One of them, that is sort of a super panzer division, in that it has a full panzer regiment and a full mech regiment and heavy tank destroyers. Experimented with the idea of a heavy tanks. And it's me still sort of maybe wish I did that, but got a lot more piercing with that. And this other one here, instead of having the heavy tank destroyers, has heavy assault guns. So very sort of overkill. I don't you know, there'll always be divisions in the wrong spot, you know. I need them out here when they're over here, or vice versa. So yes, you could always use more like regular divisions, but I think mostly I have enough, you know, decent infantry divisions. They just may not always be at the right location as this when I need them, but I got them somewhere. Just good planning or lack thereof. Oh, and I think we also have Hohen, or no, Furstenberg or something. Isn't that ready to? Thought that was in the production queue, and then I didn't see it there. Oh no, it's still here. It's just almost. I just moved a bunch of other stuff up top to get stuff done. Yeah, get across the river. They should be. I mean, they're moving. Well, rather slowly. They don't have any transport because they're not really meant to be moving across land. They're beach assault. But they do have engineers and special purpose armor, which should be getting them across. Rivers reasonably effectively. Okay, destroyer crew. Training, nice. It's all up at 45, so let's see. Submarine crew, we got a lot of those guys out there. Train them up a bit better. Think this will be, pretty sure this is, well, I don't know, maybe Sunday night my time, Monday morning, some of the other times release, but just getting ready for coming up. Now why are you moving so slow? I don't know, but at least you're not carrying anything important. Show on Twitch, but playing Japan there. He's part of the time. I'm currently reading Japanese Destroyer Captain, who the book was written by a Japanese destroyer captain, and then I think it was published in 1958. Reading that to help with talking about Japan while playing that. And that's, oh, they got one of our commerce raiders out here. Spring mud starts to clear. Okay, these guys are now moving okay. They're moving at 1 mile an hour, or less than a mile an hour, or kilometer an hour. There, I don't know how they're, whatever, I guess, whatever it calculates, it's still going. I've long asked for, and I think it's fallen mostly on deaf ears, was the ability to have a unit that was both entirely unmovable by regular movement, you know, can't do that, and can't be strategically redeployed. And this comes from two factors. One, from dealing with the bad AI, like to say, you know, oh, I want to build a, you know, defensive line. I was watching Benjamin Magnus the other day playing the Soviet Union, and he had created what he called the Magnus line, which was a defensive line back somewhere in here for the Soviet Union. You know, so you could create a, you know, defensive battle plan and then force the AI to, you know, be unable to move it. Now, of course, it does create problems in that it can't retreat, just it gets destroyed there. Want it for that reason, but I also want it for reasons sort of like my SA units that are spread all over here. I would be very tempted, at least on some of these guys that aren't the cavalry, very tempted to have them entirely immobile. And you go, well, what's the use of having the SA if you can't move them anywhere? Well, they did get moved, but rarely, in the sense of for a combat operation. Why are you just sitting there? You move further west. Or is it just everybody here is going there? That's probably it. No, they're going... Oh, some are going there. Okay, well. They just got moved as part of a stack. Part of it is because they were sort of, you know, in their local areas, and I want them to, and they, you know, and again, I say, had you started the war, say, in 36, 37, 38, you would have found the SA having a much more of a frontline combat role very early on, and especially like in 36 when they outnumbered the army. They would have been, you know, militia units fighting, and that would be fine. But they were primarily, you know, 80%, 90% used in German territories and sort of in their home territories, even in the final days as a, you know, Volkssturm type element. Some of that, and sort of keep them, you know, internal security militia and keep them from being overly abused. Also, I want to be able to create things sort of like we're dealing with the Moscow, Leningrad, Stalingrad type situations here, in that you have, say, like factory militia units, in that they are a militia unit, but they really represent manpower that's sort of like Dad's Army, if you ever saw the series, and it's a comedy, or, you know, but the Home Guard in Britain, that most of the guys in the Home Guard in Britain, they did something else. They were a farmer. They were a factory worker. They were a, you know, local butcher, local, you know, doing an important war work. You know, being a local butcher is feeding the populace who you know, works in factories, you know, making munitions, or, you know, is the butcher part of farming or whatever, you know. So they're all doing real work. But of course, that stops being a thing once Germany is, you know, actively invading Britain. But they're not going to be able to stick them all on the coast in the, you know, in the proper defensive thing. So if whether we gave it to a player or the AI, and even if they only just say moved them around within Britain, yeah, no, most of these type of units are to really mix the sort of manpower bonus, you sort of free manpower in a way, and you know, keeping going on their day jobs as militia, as that sort of proper militia. Now there's other militias, fascist militias and other ones, that really were mostly full-time militias. They're just, you know, limited training soldiers that weren't primarily farm workers, that weren't primarily factory workers, but there were definitely factory militias and things like that. And I would love to be able to create and have units like factory militias that cannot be moved away from their location. And so the idea is they're in that city. If they get destroyed, they get destroyed because Germany's coming and destroying stuff, and no one in their right mind is going to move them away from their factory. Now, of course, you can have events that, like we do at times here, remove a bunch of units and then add them back again as, say, moving factories east in the Soviet Union, having a, you know, event that destroys a bunch of the factory militias. You know, you could have several units in one city. You know, say have 3 factory militias in one city, destroy 2 of them, leaving 1 for whatever limited amounts of factories are still there, and then recreating them in the new location where the factory gets moved to somewhere east. You could do that quite easily. So you could do some of those things, but they would represent purely static, and it's you know, very purely static with no ability to reassign. Just because we see the AI doing such wacky things, but they also sort of represent, I know that is supposed to be displayed there, and I don't know whether it was my fault for not copying and pasting things or just weren't in the description, but these are sort of the idea of a similar, almost non-movable. But these are supposed to be, these units, because these don't have transport units and such, are supposed to be strategically redeployable, because these are full-time units. There is a difference there with that. Okay, fighter ground control. Yeah, I'm still paying attention to the game. Just chatting away about other things I'm thinking about while doing this. Okay, oh, we need ground crew training up for our fighters. While playing. No, I don't want to really buy from the Soviet Union. Yes, you can have metal. Ah, okay. These are both from TRE. These are two of these units that I've cautioned you not to change. The division number 178th motorized was reorganized as a Panzer division, so again we remove all of those, cost a little supplies and some manpower, and we've now created a better unit there. And the 233rd Panzer Grenadier Division was reorganized as the 233rd Panzer Division. Okay, so, and they will both be here. As you can see, this is happening in 43, so Germany is, okay, where are we there? Far from being a, invaded. These units, and they're still listed as Panzerersatz Abteilung. I don't know, these were worked on by Vlad Virgil, who unfortunately is no longer available as far as I know. I haven't heard from him in a long time. I'd love to hear from him if he's around. So these are, so I don't know what these Panzerjäger Ersatz, Abteilungs are equipped like. They were being somewhat more and more outfitted for frontline use, but they're still being listed as Ersatz, and they're still really part of the home army, that army that was going to be the army that fought the Nazis once the Hitler assassination was, happened, Stauffenberg's coup in and around Berlin particularly. And so this is, because this even had self-propelled artillery of some sort, obviously just generic, and it had a Panzer Pioneer, because these names are what basically he found mostly, and whatever his original work often had more units than would fit in it, because he was being rather, literal in that you had Panzer Grenadier Ersatz Regiment 83 and motorized 3rd, and that, but I had to squish some of them together to get them in this, because these are indistinct as in exact size, so I don't know how strong, the Panzer Pioneer Ersatz Battalion was, but it was definitely called a Panzer Pioneer Ersatz Battalion. I think a lot of these units were, well, I'm sure there's a mix of, what we call PTSD type soldiers that are back from the front that aren't really up for proper combat. Quite possibly wounded soldiers that aren't quite either ready to be sent back to the front, or would never, if at all possible, ever be sent back to the front, but we're still capable of being trainers and whatnot, still quite useful military personnel with experience, as well as recent inductees that are getting training in these types of fields in being self-propelled artillery. So they would have some level of self-propelled artillery, whether they have the latest stuff or much of the latest stuff, I don't know. I didn't have the sources that we found online, didn't have detail, because this is, Kradschützen Ersatz Battalion 3 and 4, so, okay, is it supposed to be 600 men? I don't know. That's just the number that's generic for that. But they were doing these things and training them up, and so these were very real units, and we're moving beyond just being, at least as our assumptions here, being some of the militia units. Now, some of them didn't appear, at least in our research, and trust me, it was not exhaustive. It, meaning I didn't get to the last word in any of this stuff. I don't know if anybody ever has. Again, remember that I've been reading various books, and I've been reading them stuff that was a lot of stuff. Well, hell, I was starting to read it, and I was starting to read some of the stuff like in '75 when I was very young in elementary school. So that's back in the 70s. So that stuff would have been written in the 60s and the 70s. And partially from archives that are opened up in East Berlin, partially archives that were opened up, in the former Soviet Union, captured archives. Particularly a lot of that captured stuff, I think, well, there's big nations like the Soviet Union have vast amounts of archives, and a lot of stuff is misarchived, stuck in somewhere. So I'm sure, without even knowing, for a fact, but I'm just sure that, there's rooms full of documents that got moved at some shift at some time in the Soviet Union. And somebody thinks they may be KGB secrets that they don't want, embarrassing stuff they don't want out, but when it's really just stuff that KGB collected on the Nazis that the modern Russian government would be, are not trying to keep secret from the world, because I think mostly their captured stuff nowadays, they captured from the Germans, and they'll let any sort of scholars in to look at them and whatnot, as long as you get the right permissions and whatnot to get in there. They're happy to do that. But those have been opened up to us that were never captured by the West. And of course, Germans do triplicate and more of reports, and so there would be reports at divisional headquarters, the same report at Berlin headquarters, and reports somewhere else. But there's a lot of stuff that has been captured, and then we're only since the fall of the Soviet Union, and no one's even some of these stuff, to the best of my knowledge, and talking or listening to some, I'm not talking to them, but listening to some of these people talk, that they're going through this stuff, that there's a lot of people that they're sort of just opening up a box that has documents in it, that the box is sort of labeled this, and people just sort of have I guess thumbed through and sort of see, oh, these are documents on tanks or something like that, and then stuck them in the box and labeled it, and boom, putting them up on the shelves. And they're opening up and finding all kinds of stuff related often in these boxes. And these I'm talking about are like American archives and the American National Archives for doing this stuff. So there's a lot of mislabeled, lots of and I'm talking about right now, whether it's in British or French archives that are captured, let alone their own. American archives that are captured of Germany, German archives remained from World War II, East German, Soviet, and potentially others. So we're still looking at stuff. We're still even finding recently as in the last 20 years, finding major battles in which multiple divisions fought against other multiple divisions that would have been something that would have been named, and we would have known about it if it had happened against the West. And since it was sort of like wrapped up in the greater Stalingrad campaign, that if you looked at some of the World at War series and some of the other stuff, I guess we're more over here, you just talk about the Germans advancing here, then getting to Stalingrad, when really again, I don't remember some of the details, and just sort of quick lectures talk about significant major battles with Soviet forces in and around this area that need scholarly work, that there was just never really good documentation in the West, and never put out in the newsreels, because it's all talking about sort of Stalingrad and whatnot and this kind of things, that they're still just finding out about these, not just a few hours of a skirmish, but days of battle that were significant casualties and tanks knocked out and whatever, and they're digging up more and more information on it. So there's all that kind of stuff, and then there's stuff we'll never know. There are people that have collections, particularly I sort of know second-hand or third-hand or whatever, of like one private and probably one of the best SS uniform collections in the world, owned by I start the name that's Dalek or something like that, not Dalek as in the Doctor Who thing, but like Dalek or whatever, sort of not terribly public collector, and only some of his information is coming out via a third person, another person who doesn't use his, he's explained that he's a scholar, or he's a professor in a university in America. But if it came out too publicly that he was such an SS collector, people might think him weird or a Nazi. He very much, I understand, is not just a person fascinated by it. But this other guy has this collection that is supposedly better than anything, and he's been collecting rather old, I think, not the World War II generation, but rather old, but collecting in, you know, the 60s and before stuff, and has stuff that is undocumented, but he has, because of the way he's collected the stuff, and I think he's in Europe, he knows it's real. It isn't some sort of post-war fantasy stuff. So badges, unit things, cuff titles, and whatever that are undocumented, both the unit and the badge is undocumented in any source that they have. So there's stuff we may never know because of the bombings, because of the, whether it's the SS or somebody else, just destroying records. Now, some of these units may have been very much here and gone, you know, existed for 3 months, and then, oh well, we're changing this and reforming you into something else. So it's, some of the stuff is just sort of for minutia collectors to really worry about. Other stuff is big and significant. Mikhail, who I know watches sometime, hi Mikhail, he recently posted a really important photograph, for me at least. Some of the stuff that I've looked in for TRE has been Germany repatriating Germans from either soon to be or already has become Soviet-controlled territory, and looking into some of that stuff that they were doing. And he posted a photograph of I forget the SS officer's name, though he identified it, which is very useful, shaking hands with a Soviet uniformed officer. But he was one of the people in charge of dealing with the Soviet Union. So an SS, I don't know if he was Waffen or just Allgemeine SS, right offhand, because I haven't researched him yet. But he was one of the people in charge of dealing with the Soviets, going into Soviet territory as an SS guy in SS uniform to collect Germans. And they're also talking about into Volksdeutsch from sort of Bessarabia here after the Soviets took it over, that the Germans were allowed to go into these parts, not Far East or whatever you want to call this, but sort of the border regions, and getting Volksdeutsch out. And just that photograph of him shaking the Soviet officer's hand is fascinating to me, is useful for, you know, an event dealing with it, which helps me dig deeper into this sort of weird, murky cooperation between the SS and what is probably NKVD and other sorts of types of people. And so all these kind of things that are still coming to light. And I really love that Mikhail, who I often retweet his tweets, he's posting in Russian because he lives in Sochi. And so his sources are coming sort of from the Russian sources, which are, shall we say, very opaque, very hard for me to see because they're all in the Cyrillic typeface. So, you know, I can't easily search it. I can do, you know, copy paste in Google and do a Google Translate, which normally gets me what's going on once I have that. But I really can't even do the online, you know, effectively. And I know a few of you, I think it was Rick or somebody, forget who exactly, but posted a link to the Bundeswehr archives. Well, you might want to use this for, you know, either event pictures or for thumbnails. Well, yeah, and I know about it, and I saved that link too, and I have that, and I know it's up there. But it's just so much to look through. Even that, you know, I could spend days and days looking through what's online. So filtering some of the stuff like that is very helpful to me. It's not that I can't find it. It's not that it's not available to me. It's just there's so much of it going, you know. What am I going to do? Am I going to do a YouTube channel? Am I going to do a mod building channel? Or am I going to spend all my time digging through archives? I mean, you know, it's sort of some, you know, trying to do the first two, mix those, but I haven't been doing much modding, unfortunately, because I'm trying to build this up. while I can. Okay. See, I'm really sort of, quite honestly, hope to get the channel built up to where it's good and it sort of hums along with good viewership levels, much bigger than it is now, to where I can just keep it going, keep playing some games, because I'm always going to be playing games anyways, keep playing them for you, and then be able to have more time, though, to do more modding. Okay, light cruiser. Armor has advanced. Good. We are doing some of this because even though we are already, we're just going up to that level. Already building a bunch of these things, and I don't know if I'm ever going to send them back through the. I think we're going to avoid trying to do battle cruisers. I'll probably not do too much. Both of these, I think, need to go back through. You know, put them back through the production line. The okay, let's do torpedo bomber focus. Because there's a lot of competing things that I want to do. A lot. Just trust me, guys, I can get lost into modding. That is the actual coding of the event, you know, digging out and doing the actual coding sort of work. That isn't my favorite. But I love sort of, well, even, we'll give Kepler that division. Do we have any fighters here? No? Okay. Some of the, maybe not the best on writing the event descriptions, but I love sort of coming up with the basic event ideas. We're trying to turn this SS Poletsai Conf group into something a little bit more, so adding a few more support elements to it. Coming up with the, you know, the event idea, how it's going to affect the game, creating the event image, sort of creating the whole basic idea of that. I love doing that. Okay, okay, they've shattered now. Okay, okay, major defeat. Okay, they're moving up there, they're moving up there, they're still moving into there. They're going that way. Okay, so we're gonna have to give up on that until we can move in a little better. We give them fuel for money, sure. Because there's so much I want to do for modding. It's just I don't have a good way to support myself with that right now, and everything possible with Paradox right now is just on sort of on hold. And that's sort of why I am trying to do this to get this to be some sort of decent income. Okay, they look like they could use a commander. Yeah, that looks like a good choice for him. The Jaeger division there. They decided kamikaze. Okay, let's take a quick look around Japan. Well, they're still holding out here, it looks like. Okay. They're sort of pushing in there. Okay, they're still just sort of holding. I guess they're now pushing out on there, and they seem like they've got Borneo reasonably well in hand. I thought they were going to lose Borneo. Still sort of messing around with the British there. Looks to me, yes, let's see, there's like at least 10 divisions in there. Well, there's 17 transport units. So there's a lot of units there. Wow, at least 16 HQs, 19 transport units, 17 infantry brigades. Bunch of them are Manchukuo, 22 transport units, so, and 16 transport units. Wonder if they're, well, I wonder if they're over staffing, over unit, you know, overdoing it here. But then again, they haven't taken Burma yet, so I don't know. Well, the Americans have taken this. They're still holding out here in Guam, taken Rota. They've taken Iwo Jima. Wonder if John Wayne helped them. Still holding Midway and Wake Island. So they're doing okay. Each side's doing okay, I would sort of say, as looks like the British still have Nauru there. Okay, so some sort of our Pacific battles are going on. Okay, assault ship flotillas have advanced. Very nice. We'll stop that. We don't need to push that ahead of schedule. Heavy cruiser armor has advanced. Now I try to, now some of these try to do the engines first, because you can see they take a bit longer than the rest, but I guess not. That's because I'd rather have faster than heavier, slow and heavy armor. Commander decision making operations. Here we go. Well, let's move some of this over to crew training. There we go. And let's save this. Okay, as we wait while this takes a long time to save, I want to thank you all for watching. I want to again thank you for liking the videos and for posting comments. Really do appreciate that. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. It's really helpful. And yes, now I'm just sort of stretching to, so I don't even want to hit the button to stop the recording while it's doing this, because I don't want to interrupt it. So we're just going to sit here and hang out while this is on your screen. Sort of over here you'll see possibly what YouTube thinks is your next video, and down here, or vice versa, will be another suggestion that I'll make. And over here, if you haven't already, you can hit the button to subscribe. But again, I'm not hitting any buttons while this is still ticking away. The music is stopped, but I think it'll start up again, because I don't think we've totally locked up. I hope not. I think this has as much, yeah, I'm just talking to talk here, has as much to do with my system as to do with, okay, see there it happens, as to do with Hearts of Iron. So we can see here they are in is Tinian, and they're trying to get Saipan. Saipan has 4 garrison units with lots of anti-aircraft to deal with American bombers being attacked by US Marines. It has as much to do with, I think, Windows 10 and my system, and that the drives are maybe going to sleep, so once it starts writing, it's sort of a little bit of a hiccup. Now of course I don't have this with other games, so I'm sure it's something to do with older Hearts of Iron slash pushing things with black ice, but that's all why I think that's happening. Okay, enough of that. See you next time for more Hearts of Iron.